Hello, people. Happy Wednesday. Exactly, McFell. Exactly. Time to look at some people's work. Let's first switch it on up. What do we do? What do we do here? There we go. Hi, Red Sensei. Hi, Ryan. How are you both doing? Let me turn the music down a little bit as well. There we go. Right, all right. How you all doing? Hope you had a wonderful week up until this point. Hello, Bodhi. Hello, Coffee Diction. Good to see you both here as well. Hope you're doing great. Did something crazy today. Went out. Oh my god. Shocking. I went out and grabbed lunch in the middle of Berlin. It was nice. A lot of fun. Chilled a little bit in the Starbucks as well. That was nice. Yeah, but Red, you're on the money because it's so cozy, you know? Like just crunching through the snow. So nice. Leonardo is saying your jet bike is still awesome, Bodhi. Hell yeah. Yeah, that post came out really nice, Bodhi. It was awesome. So yeah, on my side everything is going good. There is some stuff happening that I can't talk about yet. Oh damn it, I'm gonna sound so boring. So there's one thing that I can't talk about yet. Hopefully soon. There's another thing that I'm working on that I can't talk about yet. Hopefully soon. So I'm basically spending all my time on stuff that I can't really talk about yet. Yeah. Sorry to be such a tease about it. I promise you it's going to be good though. The high builds, yes. Yeah, honestly, like I think... So... Little bit of context. Little bit of context. Because last year, so that was the first year when I was doing Beyond Extend full time, right? Lots of stuff to figure out. We tried like a lot of different things. Kind of like what I was saying in the little recap that's on Patreon, right? And I thought, you know, let's go back to basics. Let's go more focused on like the actual reason why people are here, right? To grow, to become a better environment artist. So the thing that I'm working on is really closely aligned with that. And it's something that I think is going to serve a lot of people too. And honestly, it's making good progress. And I'm kind of freaking excited about it myself. Which also doesn't happen too often, I guess. But yeah, more on that soon. Any news on the new team challenge? So, we had a sit down with... myself, Lloyd, and 2 new people that will be joining us for the team. It was like sort of like a first introduction, sit down moment, right? To get to know the team, which was awesome. We did talk about some things, especially when it comes to like the team challenge itself and like the timing of it. So we decided to push it by a week, which would mean that the team challenges now, well, the next team challenge now starts in March. So that means that you can expect the signups to go open in half of February, somewhere around that timeline. And then the production is going to start with like the week post-production in March, and then the rest of it is still going to remain the same. So it's going to be running through March and into the next month as well. Oh, hype. Oh yeah, see ya. Okay. I wanna get your opinion on that soon. So I'll probably reach out to you at some point. Gotta get some feedback, you know? Alright. Enough yapping. We're here for something different. We're here to talk about people's work and give feedback. So, we're gonna start out with Connor. Connor is a new addition to our community, I think. Let me double check. Yes, Connor is new. So first of all, welcome to the community. Happy to see you here. I would like to get some feedback on how I can push the scene further as a whole. Currently a work in progress. Okay, so there is a GIF in there as well, which was interesting to see, but it's not really going to be that relevant for the stream. So let's have a look. Couple of things that stood out to me immediately. First of all, main focal point, right? Looks really nice. The reason why I like it so much is because you have a lot of detail going on in the center of the piece, right? So it helps direct like the focus to the center. Plus, you also have like a fairly simple, not that there's anything wrong with it, like a very simple composition, right? Focusing you to the middle. Everything is kind of serving like the focal point, which is really nice. I really like that at this point. That being said, some of the stuff here can definitely be improved, right? Like some of the assets, and especially the way that it's currently being textured looks kind of weird. So, for example, the pillars are something that like immediately stood out to me. Because what they look like is you have some sort of like a trim, I'm assuming, or like some sort of tileable texture that is added on top of it, but the geometry is not enough to support what you're trying to convey with that texture, right? So right now you're just slapping like a texture on a box. Usually not enough. I see that you're trying to do something, right, with the geometry, but I think you really have to push it a little bit further and also deform the geometry to conform with the textures that you're adding on top of it too. Okay. So that was like the first thing that really stood out to me. Like immediately, right? So, hello? There we go. That would be more geo. Like you could add that with like modeling it in, or you could also like go in and sculpt like more geometry onto it as well. So let me take some notes here as well, right? The same can be applied to a certain degree as well here in the back, right? Because we got a butterfly map, which is like a long time since I used that. But that means that you have like a symmetry line, and the left and the right, like they look symmetrical. And the way that you can tell is because like the most visible things about like the texture, right? They're gonna show up as like really repeating. What I ideally want to see is sort of the same structure that you're trying to apply here, right? Where you have this arch made out of like individual bricks that kind of follow the arch because that's how they're built, right? And then have them out of like carved stones or something like that. Right, so what it basically comes down to is paying attention to how things are constructed and like really looking at like, okay, so I have this stone arch. Like, how do people build stone arches? Because if you're just gonna slap or like project the texture on top of it, it usually doesn't look good. It doesn't look convincing enough. So the first point would be the attention to details, right? And that would be pillars, the archway. Let's see. The throne itself looks really interesting, right? Because on like a shape that has a lot of geometric detail, you can most of the time even get away with just slapping like a simple tileable texture on top of it, right? You can obviously push that to the next level by then adding like additional layers on top of that tileable. But because you have a lot more geometry here, like it kind of does a good job of like massaging in like all the textures, right? Where with like this pillar, it's just cubes, so you don't have that much leeway. Let's have a look. Yeah, overall, the way that you're focusing the image is pretty good, right? You got some volumetrics. I like the god rays coming in, focusing on the chair as well. It's pretty good. You got like the lead up as well. So yeah, I think overall in terms of composition, it's really good, right? It's in a really solid place already. It's more about like taking all the assets to like the next level by again paying attention to the details, and then also maybe trying to think, right? Like maybe improving the texture work, especially around the focal point. So like this statue looks really nice already, like, but it's like a really nice base, right? And I think if you want to then take that to the next level, you're gonna add the additional layers that I was talking about. So like make it grimy, make it dirty in the crevices, right? Like show age, and maybe think about like adding details or adding little bits like spider webs or stuff like that, right? So push the textures more, especially just showing age, right? Because that always leads to like history, right? You can tell something with the textures as well. The size, it doesn't feel big enough. Yeah, so I was thinking about the size of the chair, but I actually don't think it's that big of an issue. I don't know. You might be onto something though, Leonardo. Like, because I kind of keep flip-flopping. I think it works because the chair is a part of like the facade behind it as well, right? So that could potentially work in that case. But it's still interesting to bring it up. What you could potentially try is just scaling it up to see if it feels better, right? Or maybe focusing like the light even more on the seat. But it's kind of nice that we have like this glancing light on the side of his face. Hey, thanks for the question. There is a link in the description down below that will take you to the website, and that shows you how you can become a member. Thank you for the question. Oh, hi Tobias. Bye Tobias. Yeah, cool. I think honestly, like the main thing, right, is definitely the pillar and the arch. Like the stuff that's happening in the back with the textures just doesn't look good at the moment. The rest of it looks really nice. So yeah, let's see. This is something that you could do personally, right? Like you can have a think about this yourself. Because it doesn't really bother me that the chair is so small, but it could be worth like playing around with the scale a little bit more. So I'm gonna add a question mark here. Right? Because that's something that you just have to play with and decide for yourself. But I think the way that you're like highlighting all the elements in the middle is really good. Let's see. What else do we have? So we kind of have like stuff at the bottom. Right? Like the floor feels really unfinished at the moment. Floor feels really rough at the moment. And it could potentially also do with pulling the camera like a little bit back so that we have like more of a lead up towards the throne as well. Because I feel that the throne itself is a little bit too much down in your composition. Like it's too much at the bottom of the composition. I want some sort of leeway towards the throne. Like a little bit more. So more of a lead up. So more throne lead up. Sarah watching on the big TV. That looked cozy though. Thanks for chilling out. Yeah. I think honestly, like those are the most important things that we can have a look at now. Definitely the first thing is, in order of priority, definitely the most important thing. Where you really need to pay attention to how you're applying and how you're building stuff in your scene, right? To make it realistic or like make sense towards the people that are like watching it. Yeah. Again, I love what you're doing with the focal point. Like you have like a nice mix of like very rigid structures, right? Like the stone columns and like the back feels very rigid, where you have like this sculpted detail coming into the middle of the scene. It's a nice combination of the two. So yeah, I don't know if this is from a concept, right? But it's a really nice scene. Structured really well. Yeah, it's most like the back of the textures is mostly how you apply them, right? Like the scale and application of things. Because the rough scale of these blocks, right, also gives us some indication on who built this. Like, who built this? How tall were they? Like, were they giants? Were they small? Right? And if you push it too far, it becomes unrealistic. And I think with these dimensions, we're talking about, like, let's say, so like a person is this big, right? It's almost as tall as a person. Something to take into consideration, right? I'm gonna add that to 0.1. Are you an environment artist? Yes, I am. So, well, currently technically not, I guess. But I was a senior environment artist before, yes. Hey, Henrik! Really cool atmosphere. I just didn't see that it was a chair at first. Yeah, that's an interesting point, Red. I think that's because some of the shapes, like they kind of start blending together, right? Because you have these very organic shapes. That might be something to look at, but it could also be a choice again, right? Where you want people to see like the face first and then the face is kind of looking down towards the chair, so it actually kind of works that way. But it's interesting to hear feedback about that anyway, right? Because I think I was in the same shoes, and then I realized that, like, oh, it's like this demon that might be imprisoned, but like someone is still like in control because there's like a chair in front of him, right? So yeah, be very interesting storytelling there as well. It depends on the intent behind it. Yeah, no, cool stuff, Connor. Again, welcome to the community, and I wish you the best of luck. I'm gonna be, since you're new to the community, right? I'm gonna be sharing these overpaints like in your little what is it, like little thread on Discord after the stream. Or set a light behind the chair to separate it, and it would light the demon evil. Separate it. Yeah. You could do some cool stuff like that. Yeah. Could do some cool stuff. It's always like, it's very easy, right? And I mean that in like a good way, where if you want to make something look evil, you just light it from the bottom, right? Because that's what we would do as like kids in Halloween, right? Woo, with the scary lights. You could definitely do something like that. It just, yeah, gotta be careful that doesn't feel tacky, but you know, cool stuff, Connor. Cool stuff. All right, we're gonna move on to number 2 for today. We're gonna go over to Ahmed. Hope I pronounced that right. Never seen you post, I think. Yeah. Okay, cool stuff. So Ahmed here is doing the Environment Art Mastery by Thiago Klafke. And while not asking for specific feedback, right, there are some questions in here, so I'm gonna have a look. So this is my first environment ever project. Everything is a modular piece with respect to the grid. And is there a rule for to have in-game realistic doors? Okay, I think you're talking about the metrics, right? But that's definitely something that we can talk about. So number 1. Metrics. So there are no set metrics, right? Well, what is the best way of approaching metrics is to see how big your character is, right? Which is why this is awesome. Having like a mannequin in there is always great because it allows you to compare like what would be your average like height from like a meter 80 or something like that, right? Compared to like how big the door needs to be. For example, Gears of War, very bulky characters, right? I think they had like ridiculous measurements for like their doors. I think it was something, I can't remember the measurements, but it was like ridiculous, you know? It was like 2 meters tall and like 3 meters wide or something like that, so that you could comfortably go through a door. And I think even with 2 people, you could go through a door. So no set metrics. I would just have a look at the doors that are very common there. What you could usually do, this is actually an interesting thing that I do as well. So I look at standard door sizes in the country. Because usually they have some sort of measurement system that kind of standardizes like all the door measurements, right? So in this case, if you're thinking about Japan, you could look up standard door measurements Japan, right? And then you probably have to do some sort of conversion. Yeah, that's, if you want to have like accurate measurements, that's also a way to do it. Or the other option is measure with reference, right? Like with a reference character or with a reference image, anything that can, where you can extrapolate the proportions of someone and kind of roughly map it onto like the proportions of a building, right? So yeah. And also there's another thing. It's more of a concern, right, that you brought up, but I'm at this stage where I'm not sure if this is gonna be great or not. This is very important, right? And I want to make this very clear. It's yeah, okay, I guess YouTube is gonna hate me for this, but like it's the stage of shit. Like every environment, every project goes through like the ugly stage, right? Every project has this. My projects have it. Everyone else's project have it too. The only thing that changes is your perception of what makes it so, right? So this is like a very normal thing. It's just because you haven't really experienced this because this is like your first big environment project, right? That you're getting into this mode of like, oh my god, this is not going to be good. I'm spending so much time on it. Like there's all these like internal worries, right? And these internal concerns that are coming up around this stage because you probably spent like a decent amount of time on it already. But because it is your first environment, you're learning a lot of stuff as well. So my recommendation here, and I don't know how strict Tiago's Klafka's course is because I haven't taken it myself, right? And if you're taking the course where he's following it up with you, or if you're just doing it separately. But yeah. It is very important to know where your boundaries are, how much you can take on, and then build projects towards that, right? So think about the scope of the project. What I would do with this project, I would not focus on a lot of buildings. I would focus on one. Take the smallest possible bite out of the environment and get that through the whole environment. I know that this goes against what Tiago Sklavkin is saying, right? Because Tiago Sklavkin focuses on big environments that are like really efficiently built. And it is probably purpose built for you to build it up in stages. What in my opinion the issue there is if this is like your first environment project, I don't think you're ready for that yet. And that is fine, right? I just want to make sure that that is totally fine. We just have to build something that is within your comfort zone to a certain degree because you're already going to be learning so much anyway. So I would say one building. This is, by the way, a very common technique that we do in the industry as well. We call it a vertical slice. Or a benchmark, or there's multiple names for it. Yeah, a vertical slice basically means that you're going to be building one thing, and then once you've established like all the things you needed to do with that one thing, then you like extrapolate that to the rest of the environment, right? Because once you've learned how to texture, how to model, like how to do all that stuff, it's so much easier to then apply that sort of thinking to the rest of the environment too. That's what I will say. I don't think there were any more questions. I just want to make sure that we're setting you up for success, especially, again, because this is your first environment art project, right? So really think about the scope of the project and try to focus on one building and taking it all the way. Even though, yeah, it's not as big as I would expect it to. So this would be my recommendation. If you're only doing like these 3 buildings, that is also still pretty good. But yeah. You could, by the way, apply this vertical slice mentality to every step of the process, right? So, for example, if you're getting to texturing, right? You have one building that's looking complete when it comes to geometry. You could then texture the entire building just to see how much time it takes, well, how many layers you're going to use, like what kind of materials, blah, blah, blah. And then you can do all the same steps like on the other buildings as well, once you figured out the steps, right? But yeah. That would be my recommendation. see what Tiago says about this, what the recommendations are with his tutorial as well. But yeah, being in this current mindset of like, oh, I'm not sure if it's gonna be great or not. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. If we get too focused on the end result, like we forget to focus on like putting just one step in front of the other. So keep focused on that. Okay, cool. I know, not much to say about this one. I just want to see you keep going with this, right? And like a lot of people are saying, the atmosphere, it looks interesting. And a lot of people are stoked to see this one with the lighting as well. So, yeah. Keep it up, Ahmed. Alright. Then, since this one is open anyway, I'm not going to skip around. So, hello, Coffee Diction. Red. Let's see, because you did send me a message before the stream. Not having any specific questions at this point. I don't mind extra advice. Design and detail are still the biggest struggle at the moment. Yes, and establishing a proper pipeline or like a proper workflow. So, this is exactly what I wanted to talk about. That's why this guy is up here as well. I'll explain in just a sec. So, the reason why this guy is up here is because that was your project that you were doing, I don't know, like a couple of weeks ago or something like that, right? Where it had like a very specific intent, and it was to teach yourself how to make something in like a mid-poly workflow way, right? It's awesome. I love it. You were using a concept as well. Everything was great. And I honestly love the look and like all the details that you're adding on top of this. This looks really nice. So I think in terms of like setting a goal for yourself, this project was great, right? Because it, oh my God, this is going to get into a typical YouTube video, right? Where, what was it again? Like smart goals, where you make it actionable, where you have a clear goal. Like this was basically the project for that, because yeah, like you had a goal-oriented focus, and it was very specific in like, okay, I want to teach this, right? So this was great. Now we get to this one, and I'm not sure what's going on here. In terms of... Okay, so, let me make sure that I do diligence here, right? So, sci-fi design practice, this time this is a wall, but I've noticed some difficulties in finding the right approach. Design. So, okay, this is the thing, right? Like, number one here. And this is something that we've definitely have talked about already. Design is hard. Don't do it. Like, usually I try to be like very like gray, right? I don't like black and white statements, but don't do design. Design is tricky, especially if you're gonna make like a space like this. If you want to make that feel really good, designing is really hard to make that space feel really good, unless it is your goal to become like a concept designer or something like that, right? Then you could pursue design. But then I would say that you're taking the wrong approach to it, because then we're talking about 2D, right? 2D iterations of... But then I won't be able to work at CIG ever. I have to design. People say it's fan art I can't apply with. No, who says that? Like, you can make something. you can make something that is fan art, well, maybe not even fan art, right? Like this, for example, that's probably from the game itself, right? But there's other concepts out there where you would... God. Fan art has a place. 100%. Like, there's nothing really bad with fan art. The only reason why people are struggling with fan art is because people that sell themselves as making fan art and then using the logo of the game and then adding like fan art below it. There's nothing wrong with fan art by itself. What I would say though is if your goal is to work at CIG, for example, right? Which is a good goal, like you're working towards something, then picking something that is made by CIG, right? Like picking a concept that is made by CIG could give yourself like a good starting point. But for me, if I was in a hiring position then, I want to see that you can apply this to other concepts as well, where it's not necessarily CIG, but like the core foundation of like sci-fi is still there, right? But just not necessarily like Star Citizen stuff. And then at a certain point, you could potentially go into design, but then we're talking about a different job. I want to make that very clear. Like, if you want to be in charge of doing all this, doing all the designs for these things, that is a different job from actually making the environments. I want to make that very clear. So that's why I'm super black and white on don't do design. Right? Because once you go down that path, which is fine, right? You can pursue that path, but then try to focus on that and focus less on environment art. Because then we're actually talking about like 2D sketches of like, okay, what is the paneling gonna look like? What is the architectural design gonna look like? What is the kind of mood that I'm trying to convey through my design, right? That's what you have to think about then. So you're talking about like a different thing then. And sometimes what is confusing when it comes to this, right, is when you see concept designers online and they do all their stuff in 3D. That might be confusing to people. But that 3D is usually, in a lot of cases, like super sloppy. Well, not super sloppy, that's probably the wrong word. It's really focused on speed, right? It's focused on speed and ideation compared to an environment artist where the geometry needs to be clean and optimized for performance. So, yeah. Interesting feedback. That's interesting and helpful. I never saw it like that. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's hard to see that from the outside, right? Where we like the games industry doesn't make it easy. Honestly, I think I started with design again because I didn't find any concepts for a wall in the style of Star Citizen, where I got the okay with. Oh, I got 2 no's for the ones that I found. Okay, so now we're talking about something different again, right? Like you're trying to find designs from other people and then building something on that, right? Okay, I'll just keep saying what I said to other people inside of our community chat as well, because we were talking about the topic of asking for someone's approval, right? If you find something online and it's a design that's just straight up out there, you don't need to ask for approval. The only reason why you would ask for approval is because the person then would have to it's especially important when you're asking for approval to do something commercially, right? But if you're doing something for your own portfolio, like you can just credit them at the end, right? It only gets really messy when you're talking about commercial stuff. But if you're, and let's then talk about like you didn't find like any concepts for a wall in the style of Star Citizen. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be Star Citizen, right? Like I looked up luxury like private jet. This is what I got. You can take something that already exists and then translate that into it that kind of feels and looks like Star Citizen, right? Like this could be the interior of like I don't know what the spaceship lines are, right, in Star Citizen, but this could be like your luxury spaceship. And you could apply the same sort of methodology and the same sort of workflow on top of it too, right? This is perfect for mid-poly. So yeah, I think you can definitely find something. So yeah, let's make this a little bit clear, right? So if you want to do design, let's see. So let's recap that a little bit, right? Because I said a lot. So a concept designer focuses on ideas and does 2D or 3D, right? But 2D is almost always faster. Unless you're really good at 3D, right? Because you do take a couple of shortcuts by not having to think about the perspective and all that stuff, right? Now, when it comes to environment artists, right, or vehicle artists or whatever is going to be more applicable, they take the concepts from these concept designers and then turn that into actual usable geo. Most of them do a block out in 3D and then switch them. Yeah. There's like a whole bunch of like really interesting ways where you can combine the two as well. For sure. But you see what I'm saying? Like, if you want to focus on design, totally fine, right? But you're training a bunch of skills that are going to be applicable to something that at the moment I don't think you necessarily want to be, right? Is it going to be like a nice addition to your skill set? For sure. Like it's always a benefit to have like additional skills, but it would be a waste of time to put in like a lot of time into the design and then also executing on top of it, right? Again, this is also coming from a person who was in the same exact situation as you are in now, and I was further along my project, and I realized that if I really wanted to do it justice and I really want to make it look good, then I'm basically doing 2 jobs at the same time, which was not worth my time. I know that I'm being like very, very on the ball here, right? But sometimes, yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm just trying to save you money. Money, like time, right? Just want to get you focused on the thing that you want to be doing. That's what it comes down to. I feel that. Not focusing and trying to learn everything. Yeah, and again, like, I want to emphasize this, right? This is coming from a person who was doing the exact same thing. I'll even bring it up. I still have, like, a lot of screenshots from it, too. And I think I even showed this before as well. Let's see. Let's see. Real engine. Hey, screenshots. So, I did a whole bunch of stuff on here, right? I'll pick like an example here. So I was doing a scientific like testing facility that had to do with biochemistry, right? So basically the gist of it is that people were testing how to modify plants. So you had like hydroponics, all that kind of stuff. Like you had a research setup, all that stuff, right? But it got to a point where I realized that if I really wanted to take this to the next level, I needed to do like a bunch more designing than I was already doing. Because what happened is I had the hallways, right? But the hallways always looked cubes. So I had to go back, like change all the modules, change them all up, and then try to make them more interesting, right? Which is something that is like really easy to do in 2D, but once you go to 3D, it takes you like 10 times the amount of time. And this is also let's see. I had like a bunch of rev. Let's see. And I did make like a bunch of like, you know, I was concepting myself and I made like style guides and all that kind of stuff for like, okay, these are the materials that I'm going to use. This is the kind of feel that I want to have. This is all just planning that I did for myself, right? And I think I did sketches for like a bunch of different modules that I was going to build. So each module here is like a separate piece. And I was trying to figure out like how they would work together and slot together, right? Did all this, still ended up canning the project, right? This is not to scare you, right? But I just want to make sure that let's focus it on something different, right? Like what can we do to set you up for something better, right? So if you want to design something, I think what you need to do is focus again on something small. Like pick something really small and then focus your designing on that, right? Like figure out shapes, figure out angles, figure out like the balance between things. Basically take what you learn from this and apply that to like a small project. Like a single asset or something, right? And then once you kind of nail that down, because also we're just purely talking about design now, but you've also said that you were struggling with like finding the good workflow, right? So that's also another thing that we need to take into account. So again, focusing on something small, figure out the design language that you want to go for, like refine that by like doing overpaints, like experimenting a lot. Then once you got like a good design, build on top of it by executing on it with the correct workflow, right? You're also gonna have to try like a couple of things there before that is solidified, right? And then you can start applying that to like the bigger space as well. And the benefit with this sort of approach is that you have something in your backlog, right? Because if you made something yourself, you designed something yourself, you finish it, and then you put it on your portfolio, that's another piece on your portfolio. It kind of adds that as well. So yeah, I would say smaller to figure out the issues. You're always going to have issues, right? But what we want to do is we want to minimize the amount of them. So for example, if designing is the current thing that you want to focus on, like focus on something that's going to be appropriate to design for. If the workflow is causing you issues, then just focus on the workflow, right? Like you've done here. Great example, no? And then focus on the issues and then build up from that. I think especially for design, a little bit of theory is always really, really helpful. Oh, design, if you really want to dig into it, like, is very theoretical, right? Like, we're talking about yeah, shape language. We're talking about the composition of how many details you want versus like the amount of rest you want on something. We talked about it last week as well, like the balance of shapes, right? Very important when it comes to design. And also actually understanding the purpose, the actual purpose of the object, right? Because there's a saying that form follows function, right? So you need to know the function of the object before you can design the form of it. You have it in school? Oh, that's awesome. Is one item enough for a portfolio sometimes? It can be, but ideally what you want to be doing is you want to be building up your portfolio by relatively small projects that build up to something bigger, right? Because I want to be very clear, right? I'm 100% fine with people doing big projects, right? Just you got to be very careful that you set yourself up for success and minimize the chances of you ditching it, right? Because this is costing a lot of time. And yeah, like look at some references, right? Like pick a cool angle, like pick something like a luxury jet, a luxury private jet, and rebuild that. It doesn't have to be specifically from games. It doesn't have to be specifically from games for you to find something interesting, right? Thanks, Tim. You opened my eyes again. Yeah, no worries, man. Like, you gotta. I think what you have to do, right? Or like, what my suggestion to you would be, is pick like a couple of key things and find a place where you can put it in front of your eyes all the time. So, for example, right? Like, if I got something important that I need to take care of, I have post-its that are like at the bottom of my screen because I spend most of my time sitting at my PC anyway, right? So, stupid things like keep it small, you know, focus on one thing, like just have that on like a post-it note and smack that in places where you are confronted with it all the time as a constant reminder to yourself. And then once you're used to that, right? Once you're used to that, if you like internalize that lesson, which is usually after like a couple of weeks, right? You need to give that time. Then you can start building on top of it. I've been listening to like a lot of psychology stuff, so yeah. That being said, like the stuff that you were doing, right, in terms of materials and some of the shapes was pretty interesting. Right? Like you're starting to get some traction here. You just think you just want to focus on like a small thing, right? Because in terms of shapes, like it's still a box by design, right? Like everything is very boxy. Where if you want to create something interesting, you have to get away from the boxy feel. That's where the tricky thing comes in, right? Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, no, like sometimes it's also hard to know what you don't know, right? Like it's impossible to do that. So not knowing that if you focus on design, that you're basically going for a different job, that's really difficult, you know? So yeah. Happy to help with that. Yeah. Yeah. Best of luck, Coffee Diction. I hope that's helped. Alright. Thanks, no worries. Red is also saying I feel that, not focusing and trying to learn everything. Yeah, we talked about it a little bit before, right? But I've definitely had my share. I mean, I've been all over the place. And I'm not even only talking about environment art. I'm talking about like blueprints, coding, animating, like everything, you know? Just trying stuff out, making own games, making prototypes. It's crazy at some point. Which, in the end, is good, right? But I think if you're in like a time-sensitive position where you kind of want to have a job like relatively soon, you always have to narrow down your scope and focus on the things that actually matter to you. And you were also saying, I feel it's hard to tell a story with just that. So it's interesting, right? Because I also had that feeling when I was doing it. But what it basically comes down to is whenever you have one object, the story usually comes from the texturing and the way that you add stuff to the model, right? But if you do more stuff in one scene, the story doesn't come from like one thing, it comes from multiple things being in relevance to each other, right? So for me, what I always struggle with is focusing on one thing for a really long time. That's why I love being an environment artist, right? Because I have to focus on the bigger picture rather than on the single picture. So that's something to keep in mind. Like if that is something that you struggle with, where you feel like you're really struggling with just making like one asset looking really good, it might mean that something where you focus on the bigger stuff is probably a little bit more for you. The obvious annoying thing there is that everyone kind of needs to have a good base knowledge of making a single thing look good. That's kind of where it all starts. So that's the annoying part. All right, Alan. Thank you for reviewing this group project. Put feedback on the snow. As far as the feedback we're looking to receive, again, I know you hate it. General feedback is always appreciated. More direct feedback towards the building kits, the lighting, and a new background silhouette and the textures. Great advice, thanks. Yeah, no worries. It's just, yeah, something that I always struggle with myself as well. Okay. I also have something to talk about here. But first, let's focus on the advice here, right? Yeah, I mean, a lot of it we already kind of discussed. So I'm gonna kind of go through this like very quickly. Because the textures of the road feel very flat at the moment, right? It doesn't feel like there's a lot of interest there. It feels like there's just one texture and that's it, where I would expect, you know, like potholes or broken sections. You have like bits of tar, right? I don't know what the correct English translation for that is, but where you have like the split between two concrete panels and like they fix the in between up with like a little bit of tar. You could have those, like a couple of strips of that. And also generally like an indication of where cars have been driven, right? Let's call it car indication. The reason why I focus so much on the road is because it takes up so much of your scene, right? So we're talking about the bottom one. I mean, you're probably not going to see too much from the back of it, but still. Like, this is taking up a lot of space, right? We're almost talking about like half the frame. So that's why I want to see like a little bit more focus on the road as well. Because think about it in terms of prioritization, right? Like if you have something that is like almost like half the size of your screen, then that would be like a good focal point, right? Like in terms of like the prioritization of the team. So we're focusing from big to small, especially when it comes to screen space, if you want to be specific. Apart from stuff in the back, right? So for example, like the silhouettes in the back, they don't matter too much because that's what they're supposed to be, right? They're supposed to be silhouettes. So yeah, think about screen space size. McFall is asking, is the city supposed to be abandoned? Yeah, it's supposed to be somewhat of a division type setting, right? But the team is still working towards that. What I will also say, and this is something that we also talked about, like in the voice chat as well, is I have 2 screenshots here, right? So the top is from last week and the bottom is from this week. I added these 2 here because it feels there are changes, right? But it doesn't feel like there are a lot of changes. So I want to see more visual impact. The reason why is not necessarily to make it look good, right? But it's a great boost for morale for the entire team. Because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people working on it. So there should definitely be more movement in the scene. Like I want to see like a lot of stuff happening with 9 people. And I know that people are focused and I don't know the amount of time that people are spending on it, right? So that's like an unknown that I don't have like an idea for. But I definitely want to see like more changes, you know? Like I think the team can definitely put out more than they're doing now. Again, depending on time. So yes. Let's see. Direct feedback towards the building kits. The building kits are coming along nice. I like the changes that are happening. It seems like the windows are getting in. There is something weird happening with like how that might be like the refraction. Or I don't know. I'm just gonna add a question here. So these modules, are they one-sided? I'm assuming so, because I think I can see right through them and like through the back end of the other building, right? Like around the corner. So if that is the case, it should definitely be like 2-sided and like fully capped off so that we can't see the interior. Or like can't see through the entire building, right? Yeah, I mean, apart from that, I just want to see more of a lot, right? Like, more snow, more decals, more rubble, more garbage. You get the point. Right? Like, make this place feel lived in. Like, I think it could be good for the entire team to understand that the normal way of working in a studio is that you submit at the end of the day. Or depending on what kind of changes you have, right? But you submit at the end of the day because like then we can see like, oh, this person is working on this, the blockout has been updated. Cool. You know? It doesn't have to be final. It doesn't have to look good. It doesn't have to be finished. But I would have loved to see basically everything already in the scene just as a gray box. But that's currently not even happening, right? So I think we might have brought this up like last time as well. So get it in quick and iterate. Let's see. McFeld is saying, it kind of feels like the skyscraper are on the same line instead of being spread out or behind it in front of each other. Yeah, there's no parallaxing between the buildings, right? I don't know how many R's and L's there are, but you get the point. Ryan is saying, especially compared to the concept, the closer vehicle and the barricades to the other side of the road seem much less prominent in the frame to me, making the road really big in the frame. Yeah, I think the road, especially compared to the concept, I think that was actually brought up by Antonio, that the road was like way wider than it was supposed to be. And actually, I mean, that's a great point. I'm gonna make it even easier for the team, right? Like how many? A quick look. Yeah, so number 6. Compare the road versus the cars that you already have, right? Because a road is built for cars, right? Duh. So you can actually use your car and like how wide they are as a measurement for how many lanes you need to have or how wide the street needs to be. For example, what we're also dealing with, and this might happen in some cases, but the road has 3 lanes. I don't know how common that is. I'm not an American, right? But usually it's not that common. So yeah, I would just say like compare the road versus the car and see how wide the lanes need to be and how many lanes you need. And you can also use that to compare like how wide the scene needs to be comparatively too, right? So I think New York has traffic only going in one direction and most streets that aren't avenues. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I honestly have no idea how many lanes there are, so. But that's a good point, though. Yeah, but that's what I would say. Like, I want to see more changes. I want to see everything already in the scene. I want to see the whole team, like, just updating the scene, like, every couple of days at least. So that we see, like, some progress and some movement happening, right? Come on, guys. Especially because, again, it's 9 people. And that's quite a lot of people working on one project. Okay, cool. Best of luck to the team. I'm looking forward to the next update. And then we got Ryan. Ryan, who's living in the chat. Thank you so much for being active as well. A quick look on Google Maps seems to have 3 lanes, but with cars parked on the left and right. Okay, so that's kind of what they were going for. Then, in that case, McFal, thanks for looking that up. In that case, what they need to do is they'll probably have to, like, make the road less wide. Because then the road feels too wide. Which, going to be a little bit of a nightmare, but it's foundational to the whole scene, so they need to fix it. Okay. Ryan. Let me get some context here. What are you working on? Inspired by a concept art piece by Brian Jones. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Kind of pseudo sci-fi mixed with rural scenes. Cool. We're happy to get some thoughts on the texture and material work, whether some areas are lacking. For example, I don't feel super great about the boat textures or the grass at the moment. Okay. Have you This is a question for you, Ryan. Like, have you played around with making the normals of the grass face up? Have you done like any normal trickery on the grass at all? Okay. I have not yet. Was thinking about that. Good to hear. So it's a very common technique, right? To have all your grass, like the normals, basically face up. And then also disabling the tangent space normals inside of the material itself. Now, I tried to do that in the scene that I'm currently working on, and I found that it didn't really have like the sort of vibe that I was going for. So I would say try it out. Like, usually why we do that is so that all the normals kind of face the same way, right? And it makes the whole grass feel like more consistent because of it. Because what you're getting here is you're getting like really inconsistent lighting, which probably has to do with that, right? So that could be one thing to look into. Usually more like a stylized technique, I guess. Totally, yeah. Sounds good. Oh yeah, and disable tangent space normals in your material. Disable T space N in material. Okay. That will make sense. Yeah, because I think that the grass textures like look quite nice, right? Kind of like really fluffy and like really, it's almost like weed. Wheat. It kind of has like the little flares and like or like reeds, right? Like some sort of like coastal foliage. Looks really good. So yeah, I think the look itself is actually pretty good. It's just the lighting, right? This is also interesting. What's happening here is the thing. So this is like AO coming into the picture, right? I'm just thinking how you place them. Did you paint them with the foliage painter? Because that shadow is really intense, though. You did paint them? Yeah, because that's the only way, well, or placing them manually, where you get like such intense shadows, right? So what I'm using, for example, is my grass gets spawned based on the material layers. I'm not saying that you have to do it the same way, right? But the difference there is that once you place them in a procedural way, you don't get those like shadows anymore. So I'm kind of like on the opposite end. But I think I have ray tracing on the scene, and that might affect the shadowing. Yeah, there is also, depending on the version of Unreal that you're running, there are also some console commands that you can look into that really help you balance your AO. I'm just gonna name it here, right? So enable SSAO in Unreal Engine. This is what you have to look up. And it will take you to like a YouTube video of it. Can be helpful because it kind of gives you back like control over screen space AO, right? It's not necessarily going to affect yours, I think, because you're using distant field shadows, right? Because of the ray tracing, I think. No, that's Lumen. Yeah. But that could still be good to keep into account for the future, though. Then, let's have a look at the textures. So the textures and material work. I think, honestly, the texture and material work is pretty decent. It's just that the geometry is not really following the intricacies of like the materials and the textures that you're trying to set up at the moment, right? You have some bits, right, where you have like the ends going up that are looking really nice. But like the main component is still just like a little cube with a hole in it, right? I would really look at what you can do to break up the main shape. And this is, if I have to be specific, like breaking up the core shape in terms of modeling, right? Like I was saying, the texturing is actually pretty good. But once you start breaking it up with like the modeling, where let's say you have like a couple of planks that are like, there's some cracks in between. It then also gives you more options. So let's say that there's like a split here. Maybe do a split here as well for the door. Right, so you have like all these different panels. Then what you could do is you could add like really interesting things, like when it comes to the texturing as well, right? Sort of like you're doing here as well, which is starting to look like really nice. You can then apply the same sort of thinking of like the peeling paint on top of some of these sections too, right? And then maybe these ones go horizontal, but this one goes like vertical, so you can kind of have like kind of sections on the side. And then also not having these ones aligned, right? But having them like very organic, like a little bit more organic, could help a lot as well to push it to the next level, right? Good catch, totally agree. Awesome. And then if you then want to drive up like the texturing, right? What you could also do is work with sort of gradients. Like the closer it is to the floor, the more moisture is going to get attached to it, right? So you're going to have some mold, you're going to have some peel, like some paint peeling, all that kind of stuff. So you're probably going to have like grimy bottom section, then you have like a sort of in-between section, and then you have like the section that's the least affected, right? You could kind of apply that like anywhere. You have like multiple layers of this stuff happening. It's gonna look really cool. You can apply this sort of thinking towards everything in the scene, right? I'm assuming that this is floating now, but well, it is floating now, but I'm assuming that it was on the floor at some point. So you could do like some really interesting things where you can do some visual storytelling of like, this stuff used to be submerged. Let's make it a straight line then, right? This stuff used to be submerged, but now it's no longer submerged, but you can still see like the water line where it like affected like this shape, right? The waterline affects the object. And then you could drive that one step further, right? So the waterline has affected it, the paint has been peeled off completely, and then I think if this is like a metal object, you could then have like rust starting to affect like top layer, right? So that's one thing where this sort of method, right, is largely called cause and effect, which is actually really interesting and is something that I use a lot. Because it's always nice to showcase like if something has happened in the scene, then you kind of want to see like what the cause of it was and what the effect of it is too, right? So for example, if there's like a spill on the floor, then you could have like a beer bottle next to it and like a scrape on the table because someone scraped like the beer bottle on the floor. Like it's that kind of storytelling, right? Where it's not just like it's a puddle on the floor because that has no context, but there's actually like a beer bottle. And kind of get the idea, right? The more you mess around, the more you'll find out. Exactly. Mess around and find out. I added this guy over here as well, where we can again kind of employ like the same tactics as well, right? Where this stuff broke off. Could be really nice to showcase like some planks here still, right? Or like maybe some planks sticking out from the mud. You know, just showcasing that like the split happened here, which is awesome, right? I love that you're going for this idea. But then what happened with the other part of the boat, right? Like maybe I'm gonna make it like really drastic, right? Maybe this end of the boat is still here. Oh. Still here, but it's like partially in the floor, right? Do something like that. And then having the edges of the planks more broken up as well. Not all of them, right? But just picking a couple where you could have like maybe one here, and then maybe you have like one that is like split in two. Right? And then obviously we apply the same sort of thinking to this as well, right? Stuff cracked. Okay, so that means that we're revealing like a layer under the wood, right? And that layer is probably going to be newer, so it's going to have a different color, right? You can go kind of crazy with this stuff, right? But you can really showcase that what happened here and what the effect was on the stuff there as well. I would also just like, you know, add like a layer of mud here because it's in the mud to sort of blend these two together. And if you really want to go a step further, you could have like meshes. And this is just like one mesh that you kind of scale and rotate and like you kind of play around with it, right? You could have a mesh that kind of adds like it's basically there to make this edge feel less uniform than it does now. Right? And it's going to blend the two together like really nicely. You know, like the one mesh, you could keep reusing that over and over. And it's just like massaging the two together. Shape breaker. Didn't have to shout that, Henrik. Jeez. Yeah. No, I think really solid base, right? I mean, last maybe annoying thing. But yeah, add more geometry, right? Like, I don't think this is even going to be in frame, so... Oh, that's not even in frame. Okay, never mind. Ignore that. If it's not in frame, then ignore it. So. Cause and effect. Show what happened. Sir? Oh, thank you so much. You don't have to call me sir, good lad. Finding environment reference from AI, is that good or not? If it helps you, yes. If it doesn't, no. Right? Like I think the issue with getting something that's generated by AI is that usually it will lack in the areas where you want to pay the most detail. So I think it's been a while since I've played around with like any AI stuff, right? But yeah, you can still use it to your advantage. Cause and effect. Cause and effect. Is that the Mortal Kombat move? As the concept artist, please don't use AI. It's a stab in the back to designer. Yeah, I mean, I agree on that statement, but I don't want to bar other people from using it if it can add something to their life, right? I have my own opinion, and I'm not going to use AI. That's why I say that I'm also not using it, right? But I also don't want to create this feeling that you can never touch it and that you cannot experiment with it because it's bad or you shouldn't be using it. I think we have to be very careful with that side of things too. But I do 100% agree with like all the ethical issues though. And it's good that people like Carla Ortiz are like standing up for the rights, like the copyrights especially. Ryan, would you say that I should get some of those details in before or after populating more of the scene in terms of how to prioritize that work? That's a good question. So, in terms of prioritization, I would always go from like the biggest impact of the scene to like the smallest, right? So, it depends on what you want to populate it with. Like if there's still a lot that needs to go in, maybe do that first. Yeah, so I would probably... Okay, so prioritization. Because I'm seeing these cubes floating here, right? Maybe do that first. So so making sure that all the assets are in the scene in like a representable state is probably the first thing that I would do, right? And then once you have everything in the scene and the only thing that you need to worry about is like iterating, right? Then you're in a good spot already. So in this case, in terms of prioritizations, I would probably get stuff into the scene first so that everything is in there and then you focus on these details. But I'm also going to give you another tip here, right? And this is something that I use myself quite often, is in terms of prioritization, try to be very conscious of how you feel or what you want to work on that day. Because, for example, sometimes it's a fine balance, right? Because I also think that sometimes you just need to push through. But I will also say that there's like lots of moments when, for example, you've been modeling the entire week, right? And you're kind of just done. Like, just switch on to something else, you know? Like, do some textures. Like, recharge those batteries. Because it's very important to keep our motivation in check when it comes to this, right? So, I think... let's see, right? Like, if you were on a curve... So you have the beginning stages where you're starting with like a little bit of energy and you're like, oh, this is fun. I'm starting to get bored. Or like I'm starting to get frustrated or whatever, right? You get to this point here. That's where you should focus on something fun to like recharge those batteries again so that the graph goes up again. That's what you're constantly balancing, right? No, it's a stupid graph, but hey. It's all about managing your mental energy. Okay, cool. Was that it? Oh, yeah. One thing that I didn't note down. Texture layers, right? So we talked about moss, paint peeling, etc. Graphs. Yeah, honestly, like if you were to condense like what I think, a lot of it comes down to this kind of stuff. Where I'm like, okay, currently I feel like I need a little break because I've been working on this all day, so I'm kind of on the graph here, so I'm just gonna take a walk. And honestly, like after that walk, even if it is just like half an hour, because the last time that I did it was yesterday, right? And I was feeling that I was kind of like just spinning tires. Like I was just doing work, but I wasn't really getting anything done. It was like, okay, screw this. I want to actually like be productive, right? So took a walk for half an hour to an hour, went to the shop, and then came back, and I felt ready. And like that just like snapped my brain into like productivity mode. You know? Because the other option would be that you like, but like I need to get this done, so I'm gonna just keep grinding wheels, and then at the end of the day, you've probably made it worse than it was before. So yeah. Nah, cool stuff, Ryan. I'm looking forward to see what you're building because this is a unique concept, right? We didn't even talk about like how unique it is and like the idea itself. But I like what you're doing here, man. I like what you're doing. And also, welcome to the community. Great to have you. All right. Next one up. Got Megval. Let's have a look. Thanks so much. That was awesome stuff. No worries. Happy to help. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Stylized Hilltop Castle. Probably gonna rework the windows and the rocks first. I added some base terrain and adjusted the lighting somewhat. Would like some feedback on the new textures as well as the lighting and the terrain. Terrain textures are just placeholder. Okay, fair enough. So, terrain. Is there a location that you're inspired by for the terrain here? That will be my first question for the terrain. And then in the meantime, we can talk about the textures a little bit. Yeah, so textures. I honestly think that the texture already looks way better, especially from a distance, right? You did a great job on fixing that because it looks way more readable. Like it is really nice and subtle, right? And it makes like the edges stand out as well. I'm assuming that you're gonna have to, well, that you're planning to do more work on the edges as well. Because right now what is happening is that do I have like a close-up somewhere? Yeah, so okay. Let's pick this area here. Because the mesh and the texture don't match at the moment. And that's something that you have to be careful of, right? Like you have to make sure that the size of the bricks like kind of fits in with the tileable, because that's why you're trying to sell the illusion that actually the entire wall is built out of individual bricks. But the way that you're selling that is by adding bricks that are as big as the actual texture. So that's something that you have to fix, especially on the edges. And also be very careful that it doesn't look too uniform, right? Because right now what is happening is you're creating two lines. We have like line number 1, which is that line, and then you have line number 2, which is that line. It's like super uniform, right? Yeah. Gotta watch out for that. Brick lines. You gotta watch out for that, buddy. Nothing specific, but I guess my mind goes to noise. Oh my god, I can't pronounce it, but I know what you're talking about. Neuschwanstein? Yeah, thanks for doing that to me, McVal. And similar, I think I'm gonna move the mountains back to show them more. Okay. So, yeah, because that's the thing, right? Like, I want you to base it on, like, a certain type of terrain, because that's gonna force you to look at references, and location more, right? That's why I'm asking this. Because if you don't have a particular section in mind, it's going to be really hard to replicate that, especially because terrain can be really tricky to get right. What I would honestly say, I'm trying to think, right? Because, okay, what I wanted to say, without thinking about what I was going to say before, is that I would honestly don't do terrain at all. Like, especially not this sort of viewpoint. Because the reason why is if you want to get this viewpoint to look good, you don't only have to make good looking terrain. You also have to do rocks, you have to do grass, you have to do trees, you have to do shrubs, and you have to do all that kind of stuff to make it look good, right? Now, you could use mega scans for that, right? You could 100% do that. And that would make it like easier and actually would give you a lot of flexibility. But if you aren't planning on doing that, then I wouldn't do like a screenshot like this. This one will be more appropriate, right? Or maybe making it on an island where you're kind of making like a cutout of a mountain, right? But this would be a lot of work. Also because I'm basing it on what you just said, right? Like your inspiration. Because my grandfather had this puzzle of, oh god, I'm gonna say it again. Neuschwanstein? Like the castle? And I can remember like the vivid autumn colors. Like it looked really nice. But it was like a top-down shot, right? Sort of like you have here, actually. Doo-doo-doo. Let's see. I mean, it is awesome, right? Like, this looks great. Let me just grab a picture here. I've used Gaia some, so I might make background terrain and put it far away and then kind of foggy. Yeah, so you could do that, right? But it would still involve like a lot of work. Let's say, for example, if we use something like this, right? Like the background terrain, like all that kind of stuff, you could make that in Gaia. But then you still end up with like a lot of work of like actually making the terrain textures, actually having like all the trees there. You know, it's still a lot of work. That's why my brain would go to somewhere where you make like from top down, where you have like a diorama or like a little cutout or something, right? Or maybe what you could do actually. Okay. Since this is on a rock, right? I'm kind of imagining that like you're only... It's gonna be terrible. Love it. And then the row goes to the back or something like that, right? Maybe doing something more akin to this, right? Where you could make like a little island that has like a castle on top of it, but it's like separate from having to make it like a giant open world. Now, I will say, like, this is your choice, right? But if you're gonna go that terrain, I'll give you two options actually. Maybe that makes it easier. So, option 1 or option A, let's go. Make it into a diorama and make everything yourself. Like you're doing right now, right? Yourself. Option B would be to make it a bigger world, but use megascans or other things. But even then, like, this is gonna take like a large amount of work. You know, don't underestimate like the work that you're gonna have to put in to make this look really good. Especially, oh, one thing that I forgot to check. Yeah, this is supposed to be stylized, right? So that limits the amount of stuff that you can use from external libraries like Megascans and all that stuff, for example. So, oh god. Yeah, in that case, I would honestly make it a diorama. Because if you're gonna go for stylized, it's gonna look cuter, right? If you do like a diorama. And you could make it like really nice, right? If you have this kind of island and you just have like a rock face like coming out of it, you could make that into like a really cute like diorama where you have like the road going to the castle. You could have that like wind all the way around and kind of go like, I don't know, like into a tunnel or something like that, you know? You could kind of do like cute stuff with that. And I might do the entire castle as well instead of this angle only. Yeah, exactly. And you make it into like a little set, right? Where you can like rotate it, and in a marmoset you can have people like look around to like all the different sides of the castle. Yeah, because the focus is supposed to be the castle, right? So spending all your time on that is probably going to be the best. Okay, so diorama, exclamation point. Like exclamation. Yeah, I would honestly go for a diorama because I kind of was going out of the assumption that this was gonna be realistic, which is not. Right, so you can make something really interesting out of this. I think that's sort of it, right? Were there other questions as well? Lighting somewhat. Lighting in a terrain. I wouldn't necessarily worry about the lighting too much. I would, at this point, just keep the lighting as is, right? Because it's like pretty neutral. Like you don't really have like, I don't know, any certain mood set up yet. But that's perfect to work with. I'm not sure what to do with the variation in the texture, and I'm gonna use mesh paint was the plan. Mesh paint. That's different from vertex paint, right? I don't think I've ever used mesh paint. Yeah, but just use vertex paint and just have like different layers set up so that whichever color you paint, like it will paint like a different layer. Yeah, I think there's also something different called mesh paint as well. That's why I'm confused. But yeah. If it's vertex paint, that's perfect. Just use that. And I'm not sure what to do for the variation in the texture. it honestly doesn't need to be much, right? Like the only thing that you would look to break up is some of the repetition, right? Where you have like these three guys like repeating, which is normal, right? Because you're trying to cover like a giant surface. So at this point, it's like pretty normal. What you then do is you make like another texture variation that kind of has like the same layout, right? You just change the seed, right? It doesn't need to be much more than that. Maybe a version of the same texture with the broken stone bricks. You could do that, but you have to be like very careful with how you're going to approach that, right? You could also have like a dirtier version, right? So that it gives you like more flexibility. But that's something we talked about last time, I think, right? So I think last time we did a breakdown like this as well. So you got your main. What you then want is like a variation that is also flat. And then you have like a dirty version. And those three are good to begin with. And then if you want like an additional thing, you can add that on top of it. Hey, short music, thanks. I don't know what for, but you're welcome. Yeah, so that would be the textures that I would use. Cool. Right. Yeah, good progress though. Like nice changes compared to last time, right? Like last time it was really intense, but I like what you're doing with the bricks now. Looks nice. Looks really good from a distance. So great job on that. Yeah, Ryan is saying, looking forward to your next updates. Me too, man. Me too. It's gonna be good. Okay, and then the last one for today, we got Nadia May. Nice. Got that rhyme skills in there. Let's see. So, Nadia, can I help you with? Let's have a look. Oh, and there was one person that we skipped because they didn't really ask any feedback or anything like that. So, yeah. I'm sorry, Smooglin, but it would be really helpful to get feedback. Or like, at least some sort of direction on it. Nadia May. Working on everything. Quickly made. Plan to optimize, rework them after the 19th of January. Okay. I would love some lighting on the... Love some feedback on the lighting. And the colors. Feedback on the assets is also welcome if you spot anything. Assets like the workbench oven. Flags aren't modeled yet. Okay. Okay. Oh. There was... duration. Okay. I think you chose good though. From the current iterations that I can see, this is pretty good. Looks nice so far. Yeah, I like the lush grass as well. And yes, the grass is optimized. Hehe. Okay. Well, it looks good. So if it's optimized, then yeah. Let's go. No complaints there. Okay. We don't have a close-up shot, right? But I'm gonna shout out this little section over here. Let me... it's pretty good overall, right? Like the reason why I'm focusing here is because there's this one section that sticks out to me where you have like your brick texture right? And then you have a cut that goes along like two edges like that, which always looks like a little bit weird. So just have this one, I don't know, like going in, or maybe this one goes in instead, right? One goes in, and then this one is slightly offset from that one. That's just a detail. It's just once I zoomed in, that's the thing that I focused on. So yeah, making sure that for the most part, you, like, I mean, for like 98%, you're good, right? It's pretty good. You can do a little bit more with the geometry, I feel. Right? You could do like cut out or like have a section here where this stuff is missing. You can do more with the current geometry that you have already. Let's see. Some feedback on the lighting. Yeah, honestly, I think the lighting is in a good spot. I actually kind of like it. So the reason why I also like it is because I'm assuming that at a certain point, like we're gonna put a light in here, which then works perfectly because we have like a shadow in here as well. So you basically what you did is you created like an artificial shape that's gonna add contrast to the whole picture, which I think once the light comes in is gonna be really nice. So that's why I like that we have this shape going on, because it's gonna add some nice contrast here in the future, which is great. Yeah. So I actually, yeah, I like the lighting so far. This guy up a little bit. Now, when it comes to the assets, let's see, get back on the assets. These guys are lovely. Like, these little guys, they look really nice. Yeah, don't feel afraid to add like a little bit more geometry here, right? Because you can definitely add some more here. Like these guys are really nice, though. I like them. Then we got this little fence over here. I'm gonna ask a question. How is this built? It's a question that I'm gonna ask there. I would improve the anvil textures. Yes, we're gonna get to that, but you're 100% right, Hendrik. I had a look at that before. I don't know. So, if I have to be honest, I don't know why we're looking at this screenshot. Is it just for the ropes? Because the rest of it kind of feels like it could be like a throwaway thing. I know that I'm being very like upfront about it, right? But I think there's nothing really of interest to look here. I think if you want to do like a composition like this, where you're showing off the ropes and like a couple of planks, do it like around the anvil area, right? Or maybe, you know, like an area like this, where you have like a combination of like a lot of stuff happening. It could be cool, right? But yeah, there's some really nice areas in your environment where you could actually like do like a detail shot. But yeah, I don't feel like this one is one of them. And also the ropes, like the bundles themselves, are actually like a little bit too small. I don't think I've ever made a video on it. But what I do, kind of difficult to explain. But in simple terms, what I do for ropes is I have a spline first, right? I just make like a circular spline and I just have like a couple of loops of it. And then what I do, I add a plane underneath it and I just drop it on that plane and just let it simulate for a little bit. So that you get like nice fall offs and all that stuff. And then you'll have to do like a little bit of cleanup, but I feel like it creates like really organic looking ropes or like rope bundles that you could work with at that point. Yeah. And they intersect or so what I do, and this is kind of like a messy way of doing it, right? So you have, that's why I said that it's like a little bit complex to explain. But in large terms, again, let's say I simulate a rope, right? I just drop it. It kind of looks a little bit janky. I then convert that back to Geo. I select one of the edges, make that back into a spline. I smooth that spline a couple of times, and then I turn that into like the final rope. Oh, okay. Sorry, Hendrik. They intersect. Yeah, it kind of looks like it's supposed to be like binding of like a plank or something, right? So that it holds like two planks together. I don't know. Yeah. Not sure what this is on the asset. Most of it looks decent though. Can definitely add more geometry, right? You can make this stuff look like nice and smooth. I think one more edge, right, in between them is gonna be enough. Yeah, I don't know how far I want to go with this. Because also we need to take into account that you're probably gonna see it from like distance, right? Improve the textures definitely on the anvil. I would even say use references because I have the feeling that not a lot of references have been used in the creation of this prop. Right, because it's super uniform. And also, I don't know if this is baked or not, but if you're baking this from like a high poly to a low poly, you need to make sure that you have a bigger bevel on your high poly. Because right now, it kind of comes out as like a really tight edge, which doesn't look too good. So increasing the bevel on the high poly if you're baking. All right. So a whole bunch of stuff here, right? So let's zoom out a little bit and summarize this. So number one was, let's say, add more geo. Make meshes look nicer, right? This can be like the barrel, stone wall, etc. Right? Number two was think about like how things are constructed. For example, the fence, right? And then looking at references for that. So we've got the barrels with more geo. The wall cut out. I really like the lighting so far. So like, yeah. So the lighting is great, and it's gonna be nice with additional. Additional contrast is gonna be nice between the shadow and the fire. Well, the TBD fire, right? Yeah, and number 4 would be texture layering, right? So really looking at references and seeing how you can break down, like textures in like their layers, right? Because for example, the anvil currently has metal. And like dirt, I think. But it's kind of hard to tell. So let me talk about that in a second. Yeah, so layering is the first one, right? Where we kind of look at like, okay, this is metal, and then we're gonna have dirt on top. Like, where's that dirt gonna be, right? The same happens with like maybe rust or maybe dirt in like the crevices of the barrel, right? Like maybe the barrels have been in mud, so you're gonna see mud at the bottom. Stuff like that, right? Like make it look interesting by layering additional layers on top of the base ones. And then also, if you're baking, then making sure that the bevel needs to be increased. All right. EO and an edge mask. Yep, you can do a lot of cool stuff with like a couple simple filters, but definitely just working on the layers, right? That's already gonna add a lot. Depends on the style as well. It looks like you could be going for like a different style, but then yeah. Still, oh yeah, this is the one thing that I wanted to bring up here is when it comes to the texturing, right? Thinking about it in the same ways as you do with other elements of the scene. And specifically what I'm talking about is contrast. So when you have the anvil, right? The anvil feels really noisy. And that's because you have the base metal and then you have dirt on top of it, but the dirt is not applied in like a contrasted way, right? If you were to condense it down to like certain areas where dirt would make sense, then you could see like a clear distinction between the dirt and like the metal that is beneath the dirt. So that's what I mean with contrast. But it kind of links into like the layering as well. Yeah, contrast between rest and noise. Be a good way of describing it. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Nadia May. Thank you for submitting your work, and thank you so much to anyone else. Really, like, it's always great to see like the amount of talent that is coming out. And I know that I say that every time, but it's like really inspiring to see like people pushing themselves, you know, and really going out there and creating like really interesting stuff. Ryan is saying textures plus modeling on the training dummies are looking awesome on this, by the way. And the grass is great. Oh yeah, yeah. I didn't even talk about the grass that much. Like the grass is awesome. Grass is love. And yeah, the textures on the dummy have a really nice style to them. I really like them a lot. I always wonder when I should make an asset unique or when layer tilables. Oh, or when to use layer tilables, right? Like, do you have a rule for when to do what and when? It's relatively specific, right? In like a lot of cases. A really simple rule, if you want to have one, is whenever an asset is like the main part of the show, right? And you're planning to add a lot of detail to it. A lot of storytelling, like a lot of different layers. Like, I would say if you have more than 4 different layers on top of like one asset, then it's probably better with like all the transitions and all that kind of stuff. It's probably better to do it unique rather than tilables on top of it. Because layering tilables on top of something, right, is only going to get you so far, right? Because you have your base layer and then like 4 layers of like vertex paint, or like you could use a mask, I guess, but then you're limited to like 3 masks. Well, 4 if you're using the alpha. But that comes with it like its own set of restrictions, right? Because the transitions are not really going to look as good, and you can't really get like the subtle color variations that you would normally have. For example, if you have like a metal that is like oxidizing and you wanna show like all the like texture variations and all the color variations, that's gonna be really tricky to get that done with like just tilables on top of it. You could make it work, but it's probably gonna look like way better if you do that with like a unique asset. Oh, and also another rule when it comes to that is just size, right? Because the example that I was talking about, if you take that example where I said like, oh, if you want to do oxidization on metals, that's better to do unique. You can't do that on like an entire roof of like a church, right? Because that's too big of an asset. So scale definitely comes into play as well. All right, but that's going to be it for me for tonight. It was lovely hanging out with all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for also pitching in as well. That's always lovely to see. And yeah, I'll be here next week, Wednesday. Same time, same place. So I would... thanks, Leonardo. I would like to invite everyone to put a like on the video. Thanks so much, Leonardo. That's awesome. Yeah. Thanks everyone for being here. I'll catch you next week. And yeah, all the stuff that you need to know is down in the description. So go check out all the other resources that we do. Yeah. Thanks everyone. Take care. Bye.